Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me here to share a bit of our thoughts about self-driving cars. I think you should look closely to the title. Does a self-driving car represent our best hope of reaching Vision Zero? Because that will be, in a way, my end statement as well. I also have to thank my colleague and friend since long, Claes Tingvall, for helping me with this presentation. We have been a team for almost 30 years, and I have quite often to stand in for him, which is always a pleasure. Starting this from a road administrator's perspective, the Vision Zero, we should reflect a bit about the system we have today, or what I call here yesterday's system, where we have mismatches between the components of the road transport system. It is a very open and very complex system, and as you know, 1.2, 1.3 million people die out in that system. So of course there are mismatches. We've had as a tradition to trade health to mobility. We allow 30,000 people to die on the European roads every year. That's a decision we have made, to keep the mobility at the level we have it today. That trade-off is not a very good thing, I believe. We have relatively unclear responsibilities. As we heard from US, it's a mixed responsibility all the time. What is put on the driver, what is put on the system, what is put on the operators. We have weak safety philosophies and weak driving force for change. We were quite complacent about the situation 10, 15 years ago, and nothing much happened. And I think that is why our political system in Sweden decided we must do something radical. And that came from the knowledge that Sweden at that time was one of the best countries when it comes to road safety in the world, and still we had 700 people dying every year. We needed a shift in our philosophy. And the parliament very strongly decided that the long-term target is that no one should be killed or receive a long-term disability in traffic. And that was a shift in my administration from reducing accidents to reducing fatalities and severe injuries, which is making life a lot easier, because accidents we have millions and millions, but fatalities we have a reasonable number. It was a start of a more holistic approach where the different system designers, everyone influencing the design and usage of the road transport system, were invited and involved in a better way. It was the idea of a system more failure tolerant. People do make mistakes, misjudgments, and errors out in traffic all the time, and the system was not really adapted to that. We had built a system for perfect people, behaving in a perfect way, and the outcome wasn't perfect. And it's also in the parliamentary decision saying very clearly that in the longer run, mobility should be a function of safety. Not that unsafety is a function of mobility. Shifting that has been a very strong driving force in our country. And we're very happy to see that the same ideas are now picked up around the world. And the EU white paper saying that by 50-50, Europe should be close to zero fatalities. And also stating that this is a competition. EU should be world leader in safety and security of transport in all modes of transport. It is a competitive edge to it, and I think that's important to remember. Vision Zero is not only focusing fatalities, and I think there are 5 other important aspects worth mentioning. One is the ethical platform, saying health and safety is paramount. It's very highly rated. It is part of the need for us, since we are so complex in the road transport system. A joint vision about where we are going is key to success. Unless everyone influencing the road transport system is sharing the same idea about the direction, it will be very hard to get there. It has become a driving force for change. Our population is now saying, well, you promised us zero. We want higher safety. We want reduced speed limits outside my house, outside my children's school. We want medium barriers on our roads to survive. It is the idea about the shared responsibility for many actors, and it's also the safety philosophy about the failing human. And it's good to understand that the shared vision and shared customers influence us all. The road administrations, the car industry, and the road users. We all have to play together. Going to automation or self-driving cars, I just wanted to share this slide, which we call the integrated safety chain model, which is in a way read from left to right, starting with what's the excess demands to get into the road transport system. And then you get into the normal driving block. That is where we are most of the time when we are out driving. We can deviate from normal driving, we can get into emerging situations and even critical situations. And then you get to the situation where a crash is unavoidable and potentially even a crash. And this is, of course, a time sequence, but it's also a volume sequence. The vast majority of incidents end up in you being fed back into the normal driving loop. And we have more and more technical systems doing that. ESC, a very clear example where a critical situation, you lose control, is deviated back into the control loop. This is where emergency braking is coming in, where lane keep assist systems are coming in. But if we look at it in the frequency aspect, every car is not experiencing a crash. Very few cars actually go all the way down to the crash. We go from deviation quite often to emerging in critical situation, not that often. I guess an ESC system in a modern car is active less than 10 minutes in the lifetime of the car. But when we talk about self-driving cars, in the yellow or in the green box here, technology is active all the time. And that is something very different from having emergency techniques being activated only now and then. And that's something to reflect on. How will that influence? But the automation is coming from the crash side. The airbags have been automated for a very long time, ESC systems, emergency braking, etc. So it's stepping away from the critical and crash situations into normal driving. So as I said, a characterization of the Vision Zero is an ethical statement to focus on injuries, not crashes, the idea of shared responsibility, and the idea to adapt the road transport system to human weaknesses. What characterizes an autonomous vehicle or an autom vehicle or a self-driving vehicle? Well, we think that safety is the limiting factor. You will not allow lower safety to come out on the market. It will, of course, focus very much on keeping the car in the normal driving situation, in the green box. But for a long time, it will need all the other equipments to avoid the critical situations and even have airbags and seatbelts and everything. I don't think it's relevant to believe that autonomous vehicles are crash-free vehicles. It is vehicles which need all the crash protection that we have already invested in. A self-driving car will need to be very careful because the situational awareness is a bit blurry for a long time to come. And if you have safety as the limiting factor, then the car needs to be careful. And when it is uncertain, it has to be even more careful because anything bad can happen to it. The car will, of course, be very polite. It is a social aspect into self-driving cars, which we have not touched upon here yet so much. But that will be a fascinating thing. How do cars and people cooperate? Pedestrians and self-driving cars. Per definition, for us, it comes as a prerequisite that the car is law-abiding. It's not breaking the rules. Already that is a huge benefit for safety. And I think it's one of the cornerstones of self-driving cars that all by sudden the traffic could be within the rules and regulation. And then I think in the end of the day it will be almost a social creature, the self-driving car. But if we look at it from the safety point of view, I think the user of the car is an interesting thing. If you are a passive user, if you're a passenger, in aviation, in train, and even in buses, the safety demands are extremely high. We are prepared to queue in the safety control at airports for a very small risk for a very long time. So we have a higher valuation of the life of a passenger than the valuation of the life of a driver, which is an interesting thing to consider. We have a lot of blame the victim ideas built into us, especially if it is a young bloke being drunk. We can almost say he deserved it. But when we get into autonomous driving or automatic driving or self-driving cars, I expect that the safety demands will be at the same levels as for train passengers, airplane passengers, etc. That's a milestone in change of safety level that we can see in front of us. Leaving safety to someone else is putting safety demands up. And I like the idea about everything is human error. We can debate whether it's 82 or 90 or even 100%. Let's make it easy and call it 100% is human error. And in the past, our idea about it was to change the human. We need better drivers. That's our solution. I think in the Vision Zero, the idea was, well, change the system as well. Don't put more burden on the driver than the driver can take. And perhaps in the future, our idea is to trust the self-driving car. And as you understand, in the end of the day, it will be a balance between these three corners. You will never end up in just one. But it's a good way to look at it. Man and machine together, we must again understand that crashes are very rare events. Severe crashes, fatalities, happens less than once a day in Sweden, a country with 9 million inhabitants. So we, as humans, with all our weaknesses, errors and everything, we handle this system relatively well. And we saw that yesterday also, that we have capacities which are quite unique. And I think the way forward is to see that the capacity of humans are supported by technology. And also that technology is supported by the human. And that is what you see in aviation, for instance. It's a balance between man and machine, which is held up very high all the time. And that's what we also saw from previous presentations today. When you go into fully automatic, trusting only the machine, the risk is that you end up in very bad situation. Getting the human back into the loop can take several minutes if you have allowed the human to be far out of the driving loop. So again, stating very clearly, safety is a prerequisite for modern mobility. For any uncertain situation, I took an illustration from a Swedish town here, but when I left the Mainz Hauptbahnhof, I saw it was exactly the same thing yesterday. A very chaotic situation. And a self-driving car in that situation can only handle it by getting down to very low speeds. And you can always resolve safety problems by low speeds. So again, with poor technology, the self-driving car will be an extremely slow car. With good technology, it can be a high-speed car, that you can compensate low safety with low speeds. The role of infrastructure, we heard before that infrastructure administrators don't want to do anything. I would object clearly to that. As a Swedish highway administration, we are extremely keen on self-driving cars. We see huge potential in safety and in capacity. Adding a lane because a car can maneuver in a comfortable way on 2.5 meters instead of 3.7 meters on our motorways, it's a small investment and a huge gain compared to building another 3.5 meter on the motorways. We see huge interest, but we also see that from a higher perspective, our infrastructure in the longer term has to be adapted to self-driving cars, making complicated things more simple. And the top two slides there show the same intersection when we introduced a roundabout. Before you had 3 lanes, to handle each direction, traffic lights, pedestrians, everything chaotic. After they rebuild one lane, clearly separated pedestrian path and bicycle path. You have the median dividers, of course, very helpful for people and for machine. We have a bus stop where the bus actually is blocking traffic, which is very good for a self-driving car. If you follow the bus and the bus is stopping, you don't risk to hit the pedestrians. And this is an area where we want to invite vehicle industry to have a lot more contact with us as road administrators to find the technical solutions, which is good also for the autonomous cars. So the title I got was, does a self-driving car represent our best hope of reaching Vision Zero? And I would say the title should be, does the Vision Zero represent the best hope of reaching self-driving cars? Very, very high safety, almost down to the Vision Zero levels, will be a prerequisite for self-driving cars. And we've had a good history without self-driving cars. This is children killed in Swedish traffic from 1956 until last year. We killed over 120 children in the late 50s and early 60s, every year in our traffic. Now, last year, we had one child under the age of 7 years killed in traffic, and that happened in October. That was almost a Vision Zero year for that group of people. And we had another 8, I think, in the age range from 7 to 14. This is what we have seen without self-driving cars. And I don't think we will accept going backwards because we put out self-driving cars there. I don't think anyone is prepared to give the safety we have worked so hard to achieve away for automation. I think the future is, it will give us even more. It will not give us less. So thank you very much for your time. I hope my watch is almost at German quality. Thank you.